I'm delighted to the opportunity to welcome Senator Adam Ebbin to This Week in Virginia. Adam has been in the Senate of Virginia since 2012, after serving in the House for several terms, back in 2004 up until 2012. And then, Adam, I noticed that Senator Warner had named you Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Labor and Industry, that you served in that role before you were elected to the House of Delegates, representing in the Senate parts of Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax County. You have all kinds of interesting bills this session and other sessions, but probably the one that has gotten the most attention around the Commonwealth and to some degree around the country has been the marijuana bill. So we really want to talk with you about that bill, get you to explain to the viewers where we are right now. Crossover has happened, going into the final weeks into a special session. And so explain the bill. Angel has got her perspectives, Angel Miner, our co-host, and she's going to jump in at any time with questions. And so, Adam, let me start with you. I'll say one more thing. We're going to send people to your website. And one of the things that stands out there to me, and I've known you since way back in the early part of the 2000s, that you are a voice for the easily exploited. I like that description on your website, and it's certainly true, and it relates to this particular bill. So let me stop talking and invite you to tell us about why did you put in this bill and what's it all about?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, David and Angel. We know that hundreds of thousands of Virginians have been branded as criminals and disadvantaged in a myriad of ways in Virginia with the prohibition on cannabis, which has clearly failed. And unfortunately, it's disproportionately targeted and impacted Virginia's communities of colors. That's, I think, why the General Assembly last year decriminalized possession of marijuana on a bipartisan basis and enacted in-depth studies on the legalization of cannabis, both through JLARC, which is the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, and an executive work group from the governor's administration. And the bill was based on those in-depth studies and has now been vetted by nearly 20 hours of subcommittee work in 3 committees in the Senate, as well as a House version of the bill on the other side. I think it's a forward-thinking, deliberative approach to create a regulated adult use market for cannabis, which will also reform our criminal justice system in the long process of undoing the harms of prohibition. There's a lot to it. It's guided on a number of principles. One of them is social, racial, and economic equity. Another is looking out for public health. Third, I would say, is protection for young people. And the bill has a lot of provisions for data collection and legislative oversight to make sure that we know how it's going and how things can be improved if they need to be improved. The Senate version of the bill does repeal the possession penalty for cannabis of less than an ounce this summer. It creates an independent agency to oversee cannabis, the Cannabis Control Agency, and it provides for petition-based expungement. That means removal of criminal record for crimes, past marijuana crimes, misdemeanors, I should say, and others through petition, starting this summer, with automatic expungement to come as computer systems are redesigned. It provides for 5 types of licenses to cultivate, including to cultivate, process, distribute, retail, and testing. It provides a preference for social equity licenses, meaning people who've been disadvantaged in the past. And I should say also it does retain offense for underage consumption, under age 21. For public consumption, there's a penalty. And there's also a dedication of the revenue, 40% to at-risk pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds, 30% for an equity reinvestment fund in the community, 25% to addiction prevention and treatment services, and 5% for public health. So that's the overarching principle.
Right. And some part some part of it, you said would go into effect July 1 of this year. Now, which part is that?
The petition-based expungement, meaning people could have past offenses removed from their records, and also the development of the rules would start July 1st, and removal of the existing penalty for possession of less than an ounce of cannabis.
And am I right in thinking that maybe in your version or in Delegate Charnel Herring, the majority leader's version in the House, part of it doesn't really fully go into effect until 24?
That's correct, because we have to stand up a new agency to regulate the sale of marijuana, the legal sale, and issue licenses and so forth. And that would start, we envision, on January 1st, 2024.
Okay. Now, what has been the pushback that you have received in the Senate? The bill has passed the Senate with 23 votes, but what was the pushback? What's the argument against it? I know that you know that because you had to be ready to answer it.
I think some people aren't ready. Some people are afraid of the cannabis plant and think that it's damaging to society. And I would say it certainly has no more negative impact than alcohol, or and that in fact there's some benefits to it on the medicinal side, and that it can be used responsibly by responsible adults.
Before I keep on asking all the questions, Angel, I know you have several. Why don't you jump in with one of yours?
This bill, when it's actually passed, Virginia will be the first Southern state to legalize marijuana. Do you think other states will lead and follow in suit?
Well, I think nationally you're seeing more and more states legalizing. We just saw New Jersey, and I think it was North Dakota very recently do that. And I think there are other states doing it. I don't know that they'll do it because of Virginia, but I think this is a national trend.
Okay.
And that we will see more in coming years, and perhaps even changes at the federal level as well.
So Majority Leader's bill that's passed over in the House, and they'll be crossing over. What sort of differences have you spotted already between the two versions?
Well, the biggest version is what's called a reenactment clause. The Senate put in its bill a provision that requires the bill to be adopted again for the adult use market to actually start the licensing portion of things. And the House did not. So we'll have to get together in conference and decide what we can work out there.
So, Angel, have you talked with colleagues and students at VCU? Do you have some perspectives as a young adult about this bill?
I don't. Kind of hard to say. But one of my questions I had was, when this bill is passed, what would be some ways to enforce that minors don't get the drug and that is only 21 and up?
Well, the outlets would be severely fined and could even be closed if they were to sell to someone under 21. There'd be a penalty for an adult giving cannabis to someone under 21. Those would be, and we presume that the illicit market would suffer greatly because of the legal market, and that it would be less available that way as well.
Does it pick up some of the same penalties with regards to alcohol and tobacco, or is it any more severe, or because I know there are penalties there to merchants if they sell to underage?
Similar, and there was some desire in the Senate committee to making them parallel, which I'm not sure we need to do because some of the alcohol penalties don't make sense. I mean, there should be a penalty, but the severity of some of the penalties, there was a question about what you want to do for example, someone under 18. The first offense was a civil penalty and mandatory substance abuse class, and we need to treat this as what it is, not necessarily make any mistakes that are made in regard to other parts of the code.
Okay. I understand that probably law enforcement at least some aspects of law enforcement had concern about drivers on the highway. Any number of states have already legalized. Were you able to sufficiently answer that to the critics who raised that question based on what's happening in other states?
Yeah, I think so. We put money in, I put in a budget amendment to train law enforcement officers in advanced drug recognition training when someone is impaired when they're driving. There, believe it or not, there are actually apps that people can look and see when people follow things with their eyes and if they're impaired. Of course, you do it mainly based on their driving behavior, before you pull someone over. But that's a penalty now, and it would remain a penalty. And we just want to train more officers to make sure that people can be observant and prosecute as necessary.
You know, I would think that that it's fairly confident that a bill will pass and will go to the governor. The differences will be worked out. I could say to the viewers, if they have more interest in the Senate version or in the House version, they'll have a chance to be talking with you and with Delegate Herring and with members of the committees who will be wrestling with the differences. Every session, a certain number of bills end up in a committee of conference, and whether this one will end up, I have no prediction, but certainly some differences between the two chambers will be worked out before the governor, who has already indicated his support to enact some legislation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that this bill is definitely one that's destined to be in the conference committee where we need to iron out the details. It's a complicated bill. You know, we're creating a whole industry from scratch. Think as though alcohol had never been legalized and you were creating that from scratch. There's a lot to it. You want to get it right. But I'm sure we'll be revisiting and tinkering with some of the details in coming years as well.
Okay. Angel, did you have another question before I go in to ask another one of mine?
I know there's been a lot of pushback, and I know that some religious groups haven't been for it, but why are they against the marijuana bill? Religious aspect.
This is a policy change. I don't think it's a religious, I don't think there should be a religious objection, but it is a change, and people are rightfully concerned. They want to look out for youth, and I think that we can keep the product away from young people that's sold in Virginia. I can't speak for them, but I could say change is, it is a change, and people are wary. I think it's good that there's some skepticism held up to the bill so that we can answer these questions.
And I would just add in, if I might, Senator Ebbin, that there would be, I guess, some religious groups, not just Christian, but others, religious groups that would be against alcohol, against tobacco products. And so it may be a part of that whole package and not necessarily just marijuana related.
Yeah, I think some people have morality that they project their own opinions on things to societal change.
Let's take a little bit of a couple of minutes or so and help the viewers understand where we are. The Senate finished up bills on Friday night late. I happened to be watching, and I caught the fact that then you had all your different committees carry bills over. We're having a conversation on Monday the 8th, which in some regards, I guess, is a bit of a break time for the two chambers, since the special session starts on the 10th. I maybe have laid that out, but when it starts on the 10th, what do you expect? Another couple of weeks or 3 weeks, or how quickly are things going to move?
I think they'll move fairly quickly. It'll be a continuation of the existing session till we finish the bills. I think it shouldn't take more than 3 weeks. Normally you'd have a 6-week session this year, and that's what I think we'll end up with actually in session, about 6 weeks or so.
Let me ask you too about other bills that you're carrying. Some other interesting, very interesting bills. Most legislators have some interesting bills, and most legislators have some that are really trying to fix something that's not all that controversial, but something maybe for local government, for business. Genetic counseling, weapons on Capitol Square, national popular vote, to private corrections. Some of those bills are still alive and moving through. Any of those that you'd want to comment on?
Sure. I want to codify our existing prohibition on dangerous weapons in Capitol Square and state buildings in the interest of public safety. I think that we can have a safer discourse when there's not dangerous loaded weapons running around Capitol Square. And that's the existing policy. I just want to codify it and take it out to the grounds of the Capitol as well and make it a little bit easier for Capitol Police to enforce. Then I have a bill to deal with local flood mitigation funds, allowing more flexibility in my locality of Alexandria, as well as others where there's a fund for flood mitigation. It's become more of an issue as we've seen more extreme weather events. I have another bill dealing with unlawful evictions. Right now, when you evict someone, you're supposed to do it through the courts. We've seen a disturbing trend where people have taken the law into their own hands and changed the locks or taken off doors or turned off utilities for people. And we want to instill a penalty. There's stronger penalties in about 30 other states. And I would like there to be a penalty to the landlord when they do that. Being evicted is something that's hard to get over. You can lose your possessions. You can lose your food. You can have all kinds of problems with your work that entail because of it. And I like to see a fine of up to 4 months' rent or $5,000 when someone does that. You mentioned genetic counseling. We have a genetic counseling statute in Virginia that's a good one that licenses genetic counselors, but it allows for genetic counselors to refuse service to people based on their strongly held beliefs. And we don't have that in other medically related licenses. So I want to take that and eliminate it. It's unnecessary and goes against the genetic counselor's code of ethics. We also voted on Friday night to eliminate Virginia's marriage amendment to the Constitution, which is the start of a 2-year process before it would go to the voters. To say that instead of limiting marriage to a man and a woman officially in our Constitution, which is not the law of the land, to actually remove that and replace it with an affirmative right to marry regardless of gender or sex. So there's a lot keeping me busy besides the marijuana bill, but the marijuana bill is probably the largest.
Right. Right, and that constitutional amendment and other proposed constitutional amendments, I think most of our viewers would know that it has to be an intervening election, which there will be this fall. House of Delegates will be elected, and then it would have to pass again with the exact same verbiage. Before then, it would go on the ballot in the fall of 22. Yes,
that's correct. I had another constitutional amendment that failed, which would have allowed for a 2-term governor, but it failed on the Senate floor. Got out of committee, but didn't quite make it to passage.
Well, I noticed one that died 19-19, and then if viewers are watching that, the lieutenant governor doesn't have any vote on.
Allowing an independent commission to set the salary for members of the General Assembly.
Oh, yes.
Senator McPike of Prince William. I thought it was a good approach, but it did not garner the majority necessary for passage.
Yeah, that was one that intrigued me. I should have remembered it was the one that died 19-19 because I have thought for years, maybe for a couple of decades, that there ought to be some independent commission that helps set your salaries because they have. You and your colleagues are getting paid a lot less in buying power in dollars than you were in 2004 when you came into the House of Delegates, and because I mean, people on Social Security get their cost of living adjustments. You don't even get that automatically. And
The base salary was adjusted, was the 1980s.
right, right. And so that was a shame that failed, that there wasn't something that was set up that would allow some independent part. Well, Senator Ebbin, we really thank you for being on This Week in Virginia. We want to give you the final word about whether it's the marijuana bill or whether another matters that you'd like to say before our time is up.
Sure. Well, I would just tell your viewers that they should be in touch with their members of the General Assembly, let them know if they support a deliberative approach to legalizing cannabis in the future, remembering that we're taking several years to do it, to get the regulations right and so forth, and encourage people to talk about it with their legislators. I appreciate your having me and appreciate your helping keep us all informed.
Well, we thank you very much, and we wish you well and your colleagues well in these final days of this now special session 1 to wrap up the 2021 General Assembly. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Angel, and thank you, David.